In standard Spanish pronunciation, there are two different R sounds, the tap or flap and the trill. There are some positions in a word or phrase where only one or the other of these R's may exist, but there are some positions where either one of them may be found. In today's video, we'll discuss the standard pronunciation of each of these two sounds, as well as the position in words and phrases where they appear. I'm going to start this discussion by assuming you're a beginner-level student and don't yet know how to pronounce either of these R sounds. So let's just go ahead and review their pronunciation right now. Spanish tapped R is a simple apicoalveolar tap. This means that the tip of the tongue makes a single brief contact with the gummy ridge just above the gum line of the front teeth. Observe these example words. Oro, era, aire, para, cero. This R sound is practically identical to the way we pronounce intervocalic D and T in American English. Listen closely to how the D and T are pronounced in these words. Lado, atom, beta, yada, body, coda. One example I love to use that shows just how similar these sounds are is this English phrase, pronounced casually with a standard American English accent, compared side by side with this Spanish phrase. Notice the similarity in pronunciation between the T of pot and the R of para. Para ti, para ti, para ti, para ti, para ti, para ti. It's virtually exactly the same sound. If you're a native English speaker and you have trouble with the tapped R, it almost certainly isn't because your mouth is incapable of producing the correct sound. You produce it all the time while speaking English. Your problem is probably just that you haven't yet figured out how to mentally associate that sound with the letter R. The Spanish trilled R is pronounced by placing the tongue against the alveolar ridge and passing a stream of air between the tongue and ridge, causing the tongue to flutter. Observe these example words. Rana, reto, rosa, corre, garra, hierro. One mistake many teachers make in trying to explain the tongue position for trilled R is insisting that it's exactly the same tongue position as for English D. Spanish tapped R has exactly the same tongue position as English D, but trilled R is ever so slightly different. In order to get your tongue to trill correctly, you have to curl the tip of it upward very, very slightly so that a spot just barely on the underside of the tip of the tongue contacts the alveolar ridge. Take a second and try this. Pronounce the English D sound. D, d, d. Observe where your tongue contacts your alveolar ridge. Now curl the tip of your tongue upward a tiny little bit, just a millimeter or two, so that a spot just barely on the underside of the tip is in contact with the ridge. This is the tongue position for trilled R. Now let's talk about where these different R sounds may appear in Spanish words. First we'll discuss the tapped R, then the trilled R, and finally we'll discuss when R can be either a tap or a trill. R is pronounced as a tap when spelled as a single R between vowels, either in the middle of a word or at the end of a word when the next word starts with a vowel. Listen to these example words and phrases. Cara, suero, feroz, ser amigos, por eso. R is pronounced as a simple tap when it appears after a stop consonant, or F. Listen to these examples. Abrazo, preso, atrás, fresa, logro, pulcro. There's an extremely rare and virtually insignificant exception to this rule that I'll mention in the bonus content at the end of this video. R is pronounced as a trill at the beginning of a word. Here are some examples. Rabo, relámpago, rezo, rápido, rubio. When a double R appears in the middle of a word, it's pronounced as a trill. Observe these examples. Arriba, barro, cerro, terreno, socorro, pizarra. R is pronounced as a trill when R appears after L, N, or S. As it turns out, there are very few words in the entire Spanish language containing the LR combination. About the only two you're likely to ever encounter are these. Alrededor, alrededores. Words with the NR combination aren't super common, but there are probably a couple dozen. Here's some examples. Enrique, enredar, honra, sonrisa. Now, trilling R immediately after S is a tricky bit of phonetic gymnastics, even for native speakers. Native speakers generally resolve this issue in one of two ways, depending on the dialect they speak. In dialects that strictly pronounce all their S's, the trilled R is sibilated, while in dialects that admit S aspiration, the S is aspirated and the R is trilled. Observe these examples pronounced first with the R sibilated and then with the S aspirated. Israel, Israel. Desratizar, derratizar. Desrizar, desrizar. Desrazonable, desrazonable. Desregulación, desregulación. When R precedes a consonant, either in the middle of a word or at the end of a word, it may be either a tap or a trill. R is a tap in this position in natural speech spoken at a casual pace, and it may be a trill in this position when speaking slowly, enunciating carefully, or especially when speaking emphatically or in an oratorical style. Observe these examples pronounced first with a tap and then with a trill. Barbas, barbas. Carga, carga. Importa, importa. Ser codicioso, ser codicioso. Por detrás, por detrás. Dolor grande, dolor grande. Primer paso, primer paso. I understand that the examples in which the R is trilled sound a bit odd in the context of this video. Please remember that they're only pronounced that way in emphatic speech. And finally, when R comes at the end of a word right before a pause, that R may be either a tap or a trill. Just like in the previous situation, R is a tap in this position in natural speech spoken at a casual pace. And it may be a trill in this position when speaking slowly, enunciating carefully, or especially when speaking emphatically or in an oratorical style. Observe these examples pronounced first with a tap and then with a trill. Quiero cantar. Quiero cantar. Necesito comer. Necesito comer. No tiene que ir. No tiene que ir. Again, I understand that the examples in which the R is trilled sound a bit odd in the context of this video. Please remember that they're only pronounced this way in emphatic speech. There are basically two effective ways to organize the concept of Spanish R's in your head. One is the way we've done in this video. First, all the situations in which you find tapped R, then all the situations where you find trilled R, and then the situations in which you may find either. Another way to look at it is to ask yourself what type of R may exist at the beginning of a word, what types of R may exist in the middle of a word in various phonetic contexts, and what types of R may exist at the end of a word in various phonetic contexts. Here's how the rules I've presented in this lesson apply to the second way of organizing this topic. I recommend that you go through this video again and study this topic from this second perspective. Okay, here's a little bonus content and then we'll wrap this up. When one word ends in an R and the following word starts with an R, in normal natural speech the two R's merge into a single trilled R. You can hear examples of this in my video on linking. Pronouncing tapped and trilled R's correctly is an important part of normal Spanish speech. These sounds are not just embellishments, they carry meaning. Pronouncing them badly won't just give you a foreign accent, but it may lead to misunderstandings. There are even cases of word pairs that are pronounced nearly the same, the only difference being that one has a tapped R while the other has a trilled R. Each of the words in these pairs has a different meaning. There are dialectal variants of the R sounds. I've made a video about one of these, the sibilant R. Additionally, when I lived in the Dominican Republic, I observed a variation in the pronunciation of trilled R, wherein a small aspiration precedes the trill. I've observed merging of tapped R and L in the Dominican Republic, and I believe that merging of trilled R and L can be heard in Puerto Rico. It's my understanding that a retroflex variation of trilled R can be heard in Costa Rica, and other variants of the tap and trill exist elsewhere. As always, I recommend that non-natives like us do our best to imitate standard Spanish pronunciation, even if we live in a part of Latin America where natives employ a non-standard variant. For purposes of completeness, and only because I'm sure someone will call me out for it if I don't bring it up, there's an exception to rule number 2 from this video. In theory, if a prefix ending in one of these letters is combined with a word that starts with trilled R, then the trill is maintained. But calling such cases rare is an understatement. Searching an extensive list of Spanish prefixes, I was only able to come up with 2 that ended in one of these letters, sub y post. In searching an extensive database of Spanish words, I was not able to find any R words with post as a prefix, and only a small handful with sub as a prefix. So every word I could find that fulfills this criterion is one of the following words, or a variation of one of these words. In words in this category, the single R following B is trilled. Of the words on this list, the only one you're likely to see or need to use is this one. Alright, this has been our discussion of Spanish R's. If you've learned something from this video, please give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on future content. If you have any questions about the Spanish language, please ask in the comments. I keep a list of viewers' questions that I consult when deciding what video to make next.